So I guess I'm going to call this recording something like political trust, because that's exactly what's lacking in the current South African arena, where the PA doesn't seem to fit within the Rainbow Coalition or the Moonshot Pact. This recording that I'm making now is primarily a response to Morning Shot, who made somewhat predictable comments and disdain towards the DA. Now, I'm not speaking from any kind of privileged position in terms of information, but from the outside, it seems that it makes perfect sense that the PA and the DA would be like oil and water and not be able to mix, because there's nothing to coalesce political trust around. The PA doesn't have a manifesto that makes it anti-ANC. So what do you engineer your trust around? How can the DA call the PA its ally? Ally against what? For what? The PA as a political party is very dangerous in a certain way, because it doesn't have any principled commitments. So what is there that you can coalesce a trust around? On paper, the PA is an opportunistic form of political enterprise, and it is already in alliances with the EFF and the ANC. So they don't have any kind of coherence to the point at which that they can't negate that for themselves. They are the perfect opportunistic political animal. How it's one nice it's one way to say, well, all the animals should get together and take down the buffalo, but the hyena is not willing to do any of the work and wants a share of the spoils. But will count itself whichever side is the winning side, whichever side looks like it numerically comes out as the majority. The hyena wants to be the kingmaker. So, how do you include the hyena in the pack of wild dogs when it doesn't care whether its next meal comes from the buffalo or it comes from one of the other wild dogs? Because it's a scavenger and it'll take so a political party that is fundamentally a scavenger, how do you generate political trust around that if you can't even say, okay, well, let's make a platform that we're equally principally invested in, or let's try to create a common platform around which that we can do something. But no, they are just trained to function from positions of power and patronage. You can't have a functioning alliance like that. If it's not even capable of ruling out being in an alliance with the EFF and the ANC, then what is there to negotiate a trust around? It's one nice thing to say, well, you should just be able to get along with it. The DA should just be able to get along with any old opposition party. As long as it's in the opposition, they should be able to corral them into making them a functioning pack of wild dogs, big enough and mean enough and capable enough to take down the buffalo. It's an unreasonable expectation. It's to close your eyes when you know that you're dealing with a hyena. So, I'm using animal metaphors here. Hopefully that doesn't insult too many people, but the metaphor I think stands as a functioning one, and one that, just looking at it from an outside, as an outside observer to the political arena, like, what is the DA supposed to do? It's very easy to just put everything at the feet of the DA when they're the ones who walk away from the bargaining table, and saying, well, they should have walked away with something that is functional and puts them in power. It's, I mean, this continues this trend of blaming the DA for everything. It's almost like white guilt. It never, it's just this inexhaustible well of that, well, you can always just say that they should have done something more. But, I mean, if anything, again, you blame the electorate, who vote in these other parties, who didn't have anti-ANC credentials, and who allow for this kind of political opportunism. What is there to make an ally out of the PA? What does the PA stand for that makes it a natural ally of good governance, when they are, in principle, they don't have any, and they're already in bed with the ANC and the EFF in so many places? How do you pin down such a political party and try to give it some... Because, I mean, first of all, to have a pact government, or to have a coalitional kind of pact, you need to see eye to eye on something. But if you only operate from a position of political opportunism and power, so that you're capable of relying on patronage, what is there to do or deal with? So, if what is happening now is a, what do you call it, an audition for the 2024 election space, it makes sense that the PA is not a prospective partner and member of the Moonshot Pact. That makes more sense. At least the PA in its current incarnation is essentially not something that can find itself capable of facilitating a coalition. I mean, well, this is the kind of partnership that the ANC is... I mean, think about it. People that are already in an alliance with the ANC, they know how this stuff goes. People who are kingmakers, they get cut special deals. They get cut in on the patronage at a certain level. That is how the PA is used to operating. It wants to be treated like an ANC partner by the opposition bloc, just because the opposition bloc looks like that they do have a decent chance of coming out on top post-2024. But the PA doesn't really care either way, because they're just political opportunists. They'll just go with whichever side will treat them like they're used to, so, I mean, the idea that we haven't had a successful coalition take off and emerge, I think is wisdom on the part of the DA. Yes, you can say, well, in another universe, it would be a better outcome to just take power where you can, and use that as a stepping stone and a model of success, that the opposition parties can work together. Well, I do think that mostly the opposition parties can work together. All of those parties that are ideologically opposed to the ANC and the EFF show a willingness to work together, and the PA has no such ideological commitment. And therefore, they're not willing to sacrifice anything to enter into a coalition. They want to be treated as the ANC would treat them, as a kingmaker. Now, when you have that kind of business relationship, it makes sense that kind of transactional mercantilism, it makes sense that you can't incorporate that in the Moonshot Pact, that is not a member fit to join the Moonshot Pact. So, I mean, the DA is keeping the credentials of the Moonshot Pact. You know, it makes sense that the PA is not a natural ally of the Rainbow Coalition. It's just not. I mean, like, what is its credential that makes that it's not, that it's simply not the ANC and the EFF, that it's purely opportunistic and looking for financial patronage? Because if it doesn't have the kind of ideological backbone that it can make a principled stance or make principled investments in a coalitional pact that has a common plan of action. Again, the biggest question is, what is there that can... What does the PA have that can actually be engaged with? It doesn't have the machinery inside of itself to muster the integrity to hold itself to any kind of agreement or commitment on principles on paper. They just don't care. They are... So how could you ever include them in the Moonshot Pact if they don't believe in anything? So, I mean, the problem is that the PA is just... It's a different kind of political animal. It's not as ideologically robust as the other political parties that are Moonshot Pact parties. I mean, like, the people at Morning Shot, Roman and such, I mean, like, they completely overlook this, that the PA is a political party that is not like the other political parties. I mean, and I would really warn them to not be so generous and gushing about a political party that is literally in alliances with the EFF and the ANC. What does that say about the PA? But this is just automatically overlooked, as if there's nothing wrong with the PA. Well, I mean, that's fine if you're not interested in politics. I mean, again, this is where ethnic nationalism, thinking like an ethnic nationalist, kind of gets you. That you, well, what do these people represent? What do they have? You know, like, I mean, they're literally populists looking for people to vote for them because they look alike, essentially. But they have absolutely no ideological character or characteristic. They are part of the divide and conquer control program of the ANC. Divide people on race, don't believe in non-racialism when it comes down to it. And you believe in what people look like so much more that it's completely overlooked that you don't have a proper manifesto, you don't have a program of action. You don't have principles that can be joined in with other political parties that share those principles, and then you exclude other parties that don't hold those principles. No, you don't even think on the level of the principles. So because the PA is a political party that doesn't think on the level of values and morality, that dimension is just completely lacking in their vocabulary, so much so that they can't even enter into good faith negotiations to join something like a coalition pact. I mean, that is really the problem with the PA. They don't want the moral language to get between them and their meal, to get between them and having someone else's lunch for breakfast. So, I mean, the idea that the DA should be scolded because they can't put up with a kind of with making the PA their client. This idea that the DA must openly make another political party their client party, like the ANC has made the PA their client. In other places, I mean, again, it is I think to task the DA with too much, because how do you expect the DA to have a two-faced position, to say, okay, well, these people, we don't believe that they should be part of the Moonshot Pact, but we are going to make a coalition government with them in Johannesburg. I mean, like, how is that going to be sold to the public? And then when it doesn't work out again, like it hasn't so many times before, and it all falls apart, the DA gets blamed. Because, they're the only ones who can have enough integrity to shoulder any accountability and responsibility. Whereas the PA has no ideology, so whatever they do, it's never their fault. It's all about how they were treated. So, yeah, I mean, just the facts of, if you look at what's going on, it makes sense that there is not enough substance to coalesce political trust around an alliance with the PA. It makes perfect sense. I mean, if the Moonshot Pact government develops in Johannesburg with the PA, well, the PA is in it and is out the Moonshot Pact. How is that? How can you have like a kind of tenant of the Moonshot Pact? So they're going to be part-time in the Moonshot Pact. How does it make any sense? So, I mean, the PA should not be in the Moonshot Pact because they're not ideologically committed to it. And it doesn't look like that they're ever going to develop enough character to actually commit itself to such a thing. They are very happy to be in alliance with the ANC. And they're only happy to switch their alliances based on public perception to some degree, and the prospect that the ANC is going to be losing a lot more places politically, and therefore a kingmaker needs to look for other people who will treat them as their client. That's what's going on here. And, that's the ground floor. And now you're just going to overlook that and just say, well, the DA should put up with it. Well, I mean, that's all right to say that the DA should do this and should do that. But, I mean, just if you think about it, how that would actually happen, there just isn't enough substance. There isn't enough merit to warrant the invention of political trust in the PA. If the PA is included in the Moonshot Pact, what does that say about the character of the Moonshot Pact? There's nothing there that the PA would be able to endorse because they're part of alliances that include the ANC and the EFF. So you would have to call the Johannesburg coalition a non-Moonshot Pact coalition because it includes the PA. Or you would have to say, well, the PA is flirting with the Moonshot Pact, or that it's got 1 foot in it and 1 foot out it. It doesn't really care about the Moonshot Pact either way. That's the real truth about the situation. Because they already are in alliance with the ANC and the EFF. See, this is the political point which Morning Shot is just completely... I guess I'm belaboring the point and I'm repeating myself. But, that's an important point that you can't just ignore. And it looks like that has... I mean, so... Roman can go and have a nice day with Gayton McKenzie and they can all have interesting interviews and things like that. But at the end of the day, the PA has no qualms about being in alliance with the ANC and the EFF. I mean, it makes sense that these parties have not been able to join into a coalition with one another. There's no basis for political trust. It's very simple. And if anyone thinks that there is a good political basis of trust, or to take it away from the ANC or something like that, that's not something that the PA fundamentally agrees in. The PA can't even get behind that very reason. So what is there to make common cause with the PA? What is there to make common cause with the PA about anything? I mean, it's basically like a prostitute. Politically speaking, how it politically operates is a kind of prostitution. And Gayton McKenzie is the kind of ethnic populist face of this thing, and he can say, well, I'm very right leaning, and I believe in nationalism, and I believe in being ultra conservative, and in all these harsh and strict things. Gayton can do all those things and put a nice ethnic populist face to a political party, but how it ideologically operates, because it doesn't really have an ideology, is that it prostitutes its leverage. So it's a very fickle conduit for obtaining political power and selling that political power. And it does this basically by being ethnically representative in some sense of, that it wants to collect votes from people who will vote for that party because you look like that leadership of that party. It's a look like me party. That's its highest morality, is that we're for people who look like me, who look like the leadership of the party. So this is the fundamental essence of the PA. I mean, you can, like, it's the name of the party, I mean, is Patriotic Alliance. So what? If you're patriotic, you should vote. You should join the alliance of true patriots. But what are they patriot? What ideas, what concepts do they patronize? If you listen to Gayton McKenzie, it's all just these are the things that would be good for promoting the interests and the rights of the people who I represent. So it's kind of patriotism for a kind of ethnic nationalism. Very thinly veiled. And then it prostitutes that political power that it garners. And it sells it to the ANC. And it'll sell it to anybody else so long as it gets a seat at the table. Where it's going to fight for what ideological values. It doesn't really talk about them. It doesn't really have them. So, you have, what's that saying? If you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for anything. What happens when you have a political organization that is centered around not standing for anything? And then everyone who gets in bed with that political organization, they get called the shady ones. They get called the ones who fail and who don't make cohesive plans and things like that. Because they can just be like water and be fluid because they don't stand for anything. So you can't pin them down on anything. You can't say that, no, well, you're failing to deliver on something because they are already allowed to be in alliance with the ANC and the EFF. They've got nothing internally against that. So what is there to rehabilitate? What is there to make a commitment around? I mean, how can the PA join the Moonshot Pact? So if you just frame it like that, how can the PA join the Moonshot Pact? It's just not possible. They just aren't the kind of animal that it's possible to become a wild dog and to join the pack. And to have an orderly, because I mean, that's what you have to do. If you hunt as a pack, you have to be somewhat regimented and ordered and planned or something like that. You have to be able to conform with a plan of action, with a strategy, and all these sorts of things. But before you even get to the common strategy, you have to have political trust. But you can't have any political trust in the PA. So it's somehow now the DA's fault for this lack of political trust that the PA has. The idea that you're just supposed to get along with the program, so the Moonshot Pact should just become the lowest common denominator and should be like the PA. How do you change the Moonshot Pact to accommodate the PA? You can phrase the question like that. How do you reconfigure the Moonshot Pact so that you can allow mercantilists to join that coalition? Well, they're only going to join it if you can just keep on renegotiating patronage and position. Powerful positions that allow and facilitate patronage. It's a complete it's a farce. And somehow it's not the DA's fault that this farce exists. It's that there is such a weak political party that exists, that is essentially an ethno-nationalist party. That doesn't have any principles or values, and that has no qualms either being in an alliance with the EFF and the ANC or with an alternative. But it wants the same deal, essentially. So, it's an ANC. The PA is a complete symptom of the ANC style of government. The PA is literally a reaction to how the ANC governs this country. And now you want to incorporate that reaction into the Moonshot Pact, where it does not belong. Well, I mean, that's the expectation that Roman has at Morning Shot. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, yes, wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice if the Johannesburg Coalition can get its feet off the ground and take off and be successful? Wouldn't it be nice? But you just have to ask the question, how could that ever work? how can the PA join the Moonshot Pact? I mean, I don't know how it's possible. Conceptually, I just don't know how it's possible. How do they fit into a group of people that are supposedly anti-EFF ANC when these people aren't anti-EFF ANC? It'll come out of the mouth of Gayton McKenzie. He'll talk badly about the EFF and the ANC, but he's still in an alliance with them in many places. So, all these announcements that come from the PA, what does it mean? As far as I can tell, it means that they were going down the road. The Action South Africa had created a no confidence vote. They were laying down the groundwork for a new coalition talks to restart a coalition in Johannesburg. But the PA can't come to the table. As far as I can see it, there is no table that can host the PA and the DA. Because the only thing that the PA care about is if they're getting a better deal than they were under the ANC-EFF arrangement. And so, what you're de facto left with is the ANC and the EFF still in power with the PA's backing, and the PA are still somewhere in the background there profiting from that with their MECs or whatever positions of power and patronage that they have under the current regime. So if you have a political party that is capable of doing that, then I would say that they're the ones who are destroying the Rainbow Coalition, because they're not willing to play ball. Their brand is neutral when it comes to the ANC or the opposition. They're like Switzerland. They're apathetic who's taking the lead in the country, the opposition or the ANC. And that must be part of their brand. I mean, ideologically, it's made allowed by the PA's ideological structure. That was, what was in their manifesto, essentially. That they don't have, that's been their reputation. They don't mind working with the ANC. I mean, I must say the PA does represent, or I mean, for me as a white South African living in Cape Town, which is in the Western Cape, a kind of threat, because, one of the effects of the betrayal of the Constitution that's had in the polity is that I think that especially coloured people don't appreciate the Constitution. They don't love the Constitution because it's done so little for them, as it were. The non-racialist guarantees in the Constitution have played has been betrayed in such a way that especially the coloured people in the Western Cape have suffered the worst of both worlds, as it were. They sit with the tax of black economic empowerment against their livelihoods and against meritocracy. So, we've had a dismantling of meritocracy in this very hypocritical, morally bankrupt way of, the government imposing its racialist quotas and things like that. And this is all supposed to be under the title of redress. And obviously this weakens the economy, this weakens the country, it weakens a common morality, because, if you don't share meritocracy with people, then you just have a kind of looming tribalism. And, the PA is partly a manifestation of this kind of disquiet. So if the PA starts growing in support with their continuing or with their continued predilection to be kingmakers, like in the Western Cape, if the PA grow in support and they politically organize themselves like prostitutes, that they'll just sell themselves to the highest bidder, you start getting poor governance in the Western Cape, which is up till now had pretty good governance. So the PA is a very real threat to destabilizing the politics of the Western Cape, also because of that kind of ethnic nationalism is a generally, I think, a precursor to poor governance. People who vote on that level of sentimentality, that they endorse that kind of populism, they are quite happy being governed by a benign dictator that Gayton McKenzie says that he wants to symbolically represent at the very least. So you keep on voting on the basis of trust in your gut. And he wants his voters to trust him in their gut and to just hand over political power, and then that political power is not constrained by ideology, is not constrained by beliefs. It's just sold for a seat at the table. Well, the table of power that then also facilitates patronage. So, that's what the PA really represents. It's a... If you ask me, the PA has inculcated within its structure something that is really worse than the EFF. Or that is just as bad as the EFF. It's the same kind of resentment-based politics and revenge-based politics. That is really, obviously the PA's platform is slightly broader than that, but it's not broader than that by much. It's a very thin, it is a very fickle kind of political organization. Their reputation carries them more than anything. And their reputation is that, they're hard bargainers around the bargaining table and they want to be treated a certain way. So, it's the same. Any mafia has the same kind of sentimentality about itself, that they don't want to be treated badly, they want to be treated well. It's this kind of bravado, this almost Trumpian sort of bravado that they want to be engaged with so that they can maximize their political prostitution. They need to be treated as if they have integrity, even though structurally, politically, they don't really have any integrity in the ideological sense, which means that it's impossible to politically trust them. And you can look at their alliances, and that speaks for itself. So I would say that the problem with the PA in the grander context of things is that we have such a dysfunctional media system in South Africa. We have such, it's so far off in the black nationalist focus that we don't even get proper reporting on parties like the PA. So because, everyone is so focused on the black nationalist kind of, black racism, we're overlooking colored racism to some degree, or ethno-fascism, or whatever you want to call it. And, you know, it would not be impossible for a party very similar to the PA to escape the kind of criticism that I'm leveling against it if it just had a little bit more dignity, if it just had a little bit more ideology, if it just had a little bit more, you know, structure in it. But it doesn't have those things. It's nebulous, it's vague. You know, it's one thing to call yourself patriotic, but to be patriotic about stuff that isn't properly chronicled, you know, is itself, you know, a kind of red flag. So yeah, I haven't listened to Morning Shot's podcast about ethno-nationalism. Probably want to get in that so I can start criticizing it more. But I would say that this is why Morning Shot have got their blinkers on, their blinders on, and they can't make proper common, you know, I do see their analysis as being a bit of a nonsense. You know, the DA should just do things to get things done, and then they can use that as a bargaining chip. Or, you know, the DA should try to create a poison chalice for the PA, just to make it look like that they're making some kind of progress. You know, it's I would just say, you know, like maybe there is something to that. I don't know if it's possible to in the field of public relations to have a kind of Moonshot Pact plus. That you have the Moonshot Pact and then you have the Moonshot Pact plus the PA. But it makes perfect sense that the PA do not fit in the Moonshot Pact. You know, they are already in an alliance with the ANC and the EFF. And they won't make common cause with the people that want to make a Moonshot Pact alliance. They don't fit. But Roman thinks that they should fit because, well, he hasn't exactly said why, except that he likes Gayton McKenzie. You know, it's just, it's a bit tenuous, is all I'm, like all these things, they don't fit together. Yeah, so I think basically the miscalculation is focusing on the fact that the DA has an opportunity to get power if it makes a coalition, including the PA. This is like an arbitrary selection of what is the most important question. You know, the question of whether the DA gets into power in Johannesburg or not. I mean, instead of getting so focused on that and hyped about that, you could simply say, well, the electorate is being represented. The PA, along with the EFF and the ANC, have a majority. And you can say, well, the PA is willing to go either way, so long as that their interests are properly looked after and protected. They're happy to go with either coalition. Well, so a section of the population voted for the PA, and, you know, the PA as a party is agnostic on questions of whether or not it should be in alliance with the ANC and EFF or not. That, you know, so I mean, that must become part of the PA's brand. In fact, it should already have been part of the PA's brand if we had a media in this country that did the right thing and that were focused on the right sort of angles. And this, instead of saying, well, the electorate has gotten what it deserves in Johannesburg, because there is a majority government that includes a coalition that which the PA is already in. Instead of saying that, it says, no, somehow this is the DA's fault. Because it can't generate sufficient political trust with the PA to enter into a coalition and to have a coalition that doesn't fall apart. And somehow it would be so easy for the DA to set it up as a poison chalice and to put more focus and blame on the PA in terms of structuring an alternative coalition government. I mean, that, is such an imaginative form of critique, which I think very basically overlooks the proximate problem here, which is that the PA doesn't stand for anything. And if it wants to keep its political brand as not being able to stand for anything, so that it can continue to do these kinds of deals, then it obviously doesn't belong in the Moonshot Pact. So, yeah, I mean, that being, the more important question here is, can the PA even be part of the Moonshot Pact? That is the bigger question. The idea that the DA should just be able to automatically work with any opposition party because they're opposition parties, I think is to overlook the special character and nature that the PA and the weaknesses of the PA style of politics. I mean, the weakness of the PA style of politics is that it's not a serious political party. It's not deep enough. It's not ideologically deep enough to even be able to join something like a Moonshot Pact. That's not the DA's fault. That's the PA's part of the PA's brand of being an ethnic, nationalistic, populist kind of party. That can't engage in any kind of moral structure. Yeah, so the PA and the DA are like oil and water. They're not going to mix. And if anything, that's a good thing, because it's going to keep the PA from joining the Moonshot Pact, which they should be kept from joining the Moonshot Pact, because they're in an alliance with the ANC and the EFF all over the place, and they have nothing inside their party that stops them from doing that, which means that they don't ideologically have a backbone. Or what is the basis on which that they're going to join the Moonshot Pact? That they're going to have 1 foot in and 1 foot out? It just doesn't. Nothing like that makes sense. It doesn't add up. You can't make that fit politically. How would Gayden McKenzie issue a press release saying that he's joining the Moonshot Pact? There's nothing coherent that he could put together that could have the PA standing in a position that isn't oxymoronical. The PA isn't capable of joining the Moonshot Pact. It's not the DA's fault. Now, the idea that you should have a coalition in government which is not a Moonshot Pact coalition, that is a non-Moonshot, that's a possibility, I guess. That's kind of the possibility that perhaps Ramon is saying should be breached and should be found. I don't even know how you broach such a topic when you're trying to float a year in advance a moonshot pact to save the country, isn't it more important to promote the brand of the moonshot pact and to promote the things that make a moonshot pact possible in the lead up to that, when you're already going to have non-moonshot pact coalitions in Johannesburg? That would be a kind of division of whatever strength the DA has as a brand. That's going to dilute its brand. It's going to also dilute the work that needs to be done to make the Moonshot Pact possible, just to save Johannesburg 1 year in advance, rather than perhaps engineering a situation where the PA is going to be blamed for being an ANC stooge, which is, as I would say, the proximate real problem undergirding the current situation. Because you see, it's one thing, look, you can analyze a problem from many different angles and you can blame many different people, but you have to work out what the proximate cause is and what the proximate underlying issue is. And if you want to blame the DA rather than the PA, then you're undermining the Moonshot Pact. And for what? For ethno-nationalism, populists. So that you can have politics of ethno-nationalistic populists that rise up and that carve up the country, and then around the committee table of political parties, they form plans of action that have got nothing to do with principles and morality. They just carve up the power between themselves. They find themselves into a nice, neat, orderly system of governance, like, the rings of power. Or is it 7 rings to rule over the dwarves, and 9 rings to rule over the realms of men, and 3 rings for the elves? I mean, that's what happens when people are just voting for their identity. And there's no ideological skin in the game. There's no ideological action. There's no high morality. Anyway, that's perhaps a far-reaching sort of esoteric point that I'm making on top of all this. But the idea that the DA should divest from the Moonshot Pact and already try to make a coalition work not in the style of the Moonshot Pact for Johannesburg, is I think to really allow the PA to take everything hostage and the politics of the PA to be your lowest common denominator for the Moonshot Pact. The idea that now, you must create a Moonshot Pact that is compatible with the PA's position. Yeah, well, I've already beaten a dead horse on this point, but, my basic question is how? How do you even make that look plausible? Never mind what the substance of that is going to entail. It's going to be absolutely no substance, which is the problem that the DA has with the PA. There's nothing of substance to have political trust in. Yeah, so although it's a bit messy, I think the morning shot is way off.